Hello, how you doing? Welcome to The Brave Front, a new podcast with a single purpose, to talk about men's mental health. My name's Tim Bainman, and although I'm not a doctor, psychologist or academic, I've been fascinated by the subject of men's mental health for years. Back in 2017, cancer diagnosis turned my life on its head and turned my head inside out. For the first time, my mental health was truly tested, and ever since then I've felt a deeper appreciation of the mental health challenges faced by many men today. So, in an effort to keep the conversation going, beyond the mental health awareness weeks, days and months, I want the Brave Front to showcase inspirational people and personalities from all walks of life across the country, who have lived experience and real life stories to share of their mental health journeys, as well as to folks far cleverer than I am, who can shed light on every dark corner when it comes to the subject of men's mental health. And in this episode, I'm delighted to welcome Franny Benali MBE to the show, a former professional football player who has undoubtedly earned himself the status of legend amongst Southampton fans, following a career at the South Coast club that spanned 16 years, almost 400 games, and one solitary goal. He's also a man who, having hung up his playing boots, now gives inspirational talks across the UK on achieving your dreams and realising your potential by taking the opportunity to step outside of your comfort zone. And if that wasn't enough, he's also rightly been awarded an MBE after raising over £1.4 million for charity, following a series of physical challenges that pushed his body and spirit beyond breaking point. But much more about that later on. I wanted to talk to Franny after I heard him speak at a sports awards event at my son's school earlier this year. At that event, he captivated an audience of over 400 young people, recalling the story of his journey in football, the struggles and sacrifices he made, and the sheer hard work and determination it took to achieve his dream. Throughout my own career, I've been fortunate enough to interview elite sportsmen and women from a variety of different sports, and every time I am struck by their dedication and laser-focused commitment to realising their goals. To me, they all seem almost superhuman, like they possess a kind of mental strength and resilience that the rest of us can only dream of. By the time they play in the Premier League, get behind the wheel of a Formula 1 car, step onto centre court or tee off at the Open, they have tens if not hundreds of thousands of hours of practice and training behind them. They've got up at the crack of dawn every day. They've approached every training session with the same fierce determination to get better. They've stayed behind after training to perfect the smallest things. They've overcome injuries, setbacks and disappointments. They've had to deal with the pain of losing in order to appreciate the joy of winning. And they've made the kind of sacrifices that would have set them apart from their friends and peers. Professional sportsmen and women, of course, are not immune to poor mental health themselves, but choosing to dedicate your life to one thing, often from the youngest of ages, takes a mental strength that I'm convinced the rest of us can learn a huge amount from. So I hope over the coming weeks and months that we can welcome a few more sporting heroes to the Brave Front, and that just like Franny Benali, we can all take a bit of that Premier League mental magic into our own lives. Franny, welcome. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. Lovely to see you. Great to have you as a guest on the show. How are you? How's things?
Hey, Tim. Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. Brilliant to join you. And I guess part of my happiness at this particular moment in time is that I've literally just become a grandfather for the first time. So,
Wow.
Really excited. That's big news for our family. So,
Congratulations.
a new little Benali boy in the family, which is just a few days old now.
Fantastic. How does it feel to be a grandad?
Yeah, I think one of the questions most people ask, isn't it? I don't feel like a granddad in many ways. I think all of us in our minds, even if it's not necessarily our bodies, we still feel that youngster inside of us, don't we? So but really, really looking forward to what this next chapter, I guess, will bring moving forward.
Circle of life stuff, isn't it? When it sort of comes around like that, amazing. Fantastic. Well, congratulations. Tell us where we find you today. I'm looking, I can see you on the call here. I can see some shirts behind you. You're obviously at home. We've got surrounded by some Southampton memorabilia. And where are you at the moment? Where do we find you?
Yeah, I'm in Southampton. Southampton is where I was born and raised, Tim. I've lived here my entire life. Obviously played for Southampton Football Club from the sort of mid-80s through to 2003, 2004. So I had a 20-year association with my hometown club and played nearly 400 appearances over that period. So very much a big part of me. And the football club is sort of central quite often to communities and things, isn't it? And it's no different here in Southampton. So yeah, I'm sat in my office at home. As you can mentioned, a few shirts around. I don't really have a huge amount of memorabilia around the house, but just I think I can get away with it in the office. I'm allowed to put a few bits up.
Excellent. Now, I mean, in football, the term legend is bounced around a lot. You hear it used a lot. But for someone who's spent as long as you have with one club, do you feel comfortable being called a legend?
A little bit. I mean, it's meant in the best way possible. Yeah. I know, and I'm very grateful and humbled by whenever it's used as a term. But I guess there's some a little small element of it that makes you feel like, because I never saw myself as the best player, Tim, over the years, and quite often that sort of recognition towards former players is often put towards players that were very, very good in their playing days, and I was pretty solid and reliable and gave everything, but I certainly wasn't the best of players in many ways.
But who are the legends that you look up to then? Who are your legends?
Oh, well, as a boy, I mean, the Southampton side that I sort of grew up with in my younger days at school was, filled with the likes of Kevin Keegan, Alan Ball, Mick Shannon, amongst many others. And in the playground, I sort of had a soft spot for Liverpool as well. They were sort of pretty much the team of the 70s and early 80s, weren't they? So, I thought I was Kenny Dalglish in the playground as a young boy. But yeah, I mean, there's so many what you would call legends of the game, certainly. And I certainly, as a young man, a young boy, aspired to be like many of those players that had gone before me.
Yeah, absolutely. But listen, I'm absolutely delighted to have you on the show. It's been, it's fantastic to see you. And we have, well, I've seen you before. We've not met in person before, but you came to my son's school a few weeks ago when he had a sports presentation there, and you spoke to all the kids in that hall. There's a lot of them. I think there's 400 odd kids in that hall.
Big event.
It was a big event, yeah. And it's a really inspirational talk that you gave. And something that came across to me was that's clearly something that you really enjoy. Those kind of events and talking to kids in that way. Clearly something that you love, and it comes across in when you're there.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Tim. I mean, it's nice that you've sort of picked up on that, really, because you're right. I get great pleasure from hopefully sort of addressing an audience, whether that be the corporate workplace, sports teams, but especially sort of younger audiences where it might be schools, colleges, universities, in the hope that just by talking about my experiences through life, growing up, even before football, my career in professional football, and then in more recent years, sort of taking on the ultra endurance challenges and raising, a sum of money for a great cause, was a big driving factor for me. And hopefully those experiences and talking about those struggles and difficulties and all the things that every single one of us goes through when we're trying to achieve something in our lives, whether that's on a personal level or professional level, and how, and what we're capable of. And just by talking about that, especially to young audiences, as you heard that night, I love the idea of hopefully just, even if it's one person leaves the event on that evening, inspired or take something from what they've heard me talking about to, sort of spin it in a positive way in their own lives, then, I love that. I like the idea of sharing the life journey that I've experienced, and those experiences within that my time frame, to hopefully help other people. I get great pleasure from that.
That's it. I'd like to talk to you about both sides of what you talked about, the football and also the endurance challenges you're undertaking, which blow my mind, by the way. Incredible challenges that you, as a runner myself, I can't comprehend, those lengths that you've gone to, which is incredible. We'll come on to that in a little bit, but take us back, if you will, to when you were a kid yourself and you were growing up. I'm trying to get into your mindset in terms of your drive and your ambition and your focus. Was football something that you always knew you wanted to do from your earliest memory? And what was that drive like to achieve and to push on?
Yeah, when I look back and think of how I was and those feelings and those memories that I have as even a very, very young boy, you're right. Football was just my love and passion. You know, I'd always be kicking a ball around, whether it was in my home, and then being told to get outside, you know, and kick a ball around in the street, you know, rather than in the house. You know, it was always something that I had a passion for. And remember, you know, I'm of an age where, you know, football never got the coverage that we see on the televisions now. You know, there was probably in those early days, maybe, you know, a television program once a week on a Saturday where you could actually watch games or highlights of football. So there wasn't really the knowledge or the coverage that would have inspired me as a youngster, but I just always was drawn to playing football. And I guess that drive and ambition to want to succeed at the sport that I wanted to go into was maybe partly made up of my background personally as well. You know, I was adopted as a baby, and you know, my adopted parents split when I was a baby in arms. So it was my mother that raised me with my grandfather in a 2-bedroom flat, which is literally a stone's throw away from Southampton Football Club Stadium now, St Mary's. And yeah, I guess, you know, it's maybe a lot more common now, you know, sort of children coming from, you know, homes where their parents split up. But, you know, back when I was growing up, it wasn't really that such a big thing necessarily. So I always felt, difference the wrong word, but, you know, I knew that I didn't come from what was a traditional sort of family background with, you know, a mum and a dad, and being an only child as well. You know, there's, you know, quite often, you know, a lot of my friends had siblings, and you know, I had to, you know, amuse myself, and quite often that meant kicking a ball around or going to play with my friends.
Did you feel that as a kid and as you were growing up and as you were sort of striving to achieve and to progress in your football, did you feel you had to make sacrifices as a youngster in terms of perhaps compared to what your friends and peers might have been doing at the time?
Yeah, I quickly realised as a youngster, you know, I knew where I was very focused, even as a young man, you know, a teenager, where I wanted to play professional football. You know, that was my one goal and ambition. You know, I wasn't great academically at school, but, you know, once I became officially connected with the football club Southampton at 14 years of age, you know, they were very strong on connecting with the school that I was at, and not just me, but, you know, any players that they signed on their books to make sure that they were putting in the effort still on the academic subjects and not just focusing on football completely. But I found that difficult because, you know, I was just so focused and driven on becoming a football player that, you know, it was almost like nothing else mattered to me in my life in many ways. But yeah, I just think those, you know, those qualities of sort of being determined and growing up and realizing that I had to sort of dedicate myself to give myself the best chance possible. And you mentioned it in a way of maybe sacrifices. I didn't really see it as a sacrifice, but, you know, when I speak to audiences, I probably said it at the sports awards that you're at, Tim, but, you know, I've never been drunk in my life, even to this day. I don't drink. I've never smoked. I've never done anything that I saw would affect my body physically to stop me performing at the best level that I could perform at. And, you know, fitness and my lifestyle is, you know, it's always been a very big factor for me, and especially during my playing career. So you could say sort of when I played in an era where, you know, drinking in football was quite a culture. You know, I was very different, maybe a little bit more like a modern day footballer in many ways, or an athlete.
I was going to say exactly that, and it struck me in your talk at the school that you know, that as you say, not having touched a drop in your life, despite playing at a time when the drinking culture was rife across football, I imagine, and you know, in the early 90s and so on, especially. Did that sort of single you out, or were you amongst like-minded peers at the time, or did it take real kind of resilience on your part and sort of mental strength to not go to the parties and to not do the things that some of your peers might have been doing at that time?
I was few and far between, put it that way. You know, I was outnumbered, and quite often just the only one. But there were a few others through the course of my career that, you know, were sort of similar to me, you know, teetotal, and but it wasn't an effort, Tim, to be honest. You know, it very quickly just became, because I was I saw it as a big part of realizing my dream and ambition. And then when I reached the level of becoming a professional, I then wanted to go to the next level again and, play on a regular basis. And then all of a sudden, the other things in your life come into it. Like, I settled down at a young age with my wife, and, we had a young family, and, we all have those bills and expenses. And even as a footballer back in that time, I may have been earning sort of decent money, but still had a mortgage to pay and all those outgoings that we all have. So there was always the work and the concentration and the effort to, stay in the team, keep earning contracts, and wanting ultimately to stay at my hometown club, because that was a big factor as well. I never wanted to leave Southampton or leave my club, and certainly not uproot my family when the children came along as well.
And during that time, those formative years when you were sort of growing in football and working your way up the ranks, as it were your mum and your granddad supportive, and the rest of your family, were they 100% behind you?
Do you know what? There was a real dynamic in my family. There, my mum had a long-term boyfriend who was like a father figure for me in many ways, but he was really into his fitness, and he was very supportive, and sort of like we just basically spending time. He was almost like a parent, like just enjoyed spending time with him. But quite often time with him would have been, if it wasn't just chilling out, it would have been, doing something active, not necessarily working out or training or playing football, but, maybe just playing some badminton or table tennis or something like that, and sort of living a healthy lifestyle. My home circumstances were, both my mum and my grandfather and a lodger that we had at our house for a while, were sort of quite heavy smokers, and and my granddad would go to the pub and enjoy a drink and things like that. So I knew there was that side of life that I didn't want to really entertain, and because it was often around me growing up as a youngster, and in many ways I didn't like it. So it wasn't really a difficult decision for me not to be partying or drinking and going out all the time. I was just so focused on being the best that I could be, and giving myself that chance to reach the heights that I wanted to.
And how did you take that mentality into? Obviously, we talked about your family there, and your mum and your grandfather. How did you, when you look back on it now, how did you take lessons you learned then, perhaps, and throughout your playing career and your life, into fatherhood yourself when you became a dad?
Oh, it's molded me massively, Tim. My experience, and I don't think that's just, I'm not unusual in that sense. I think every single one of us are sort of molded and sort of touched in one way or another through our experiences, especially when we're younger. And that was no different for me. What I saw as, I think at a really young age, I knew how I wanted to be as a, hopefully in the future, as a father and as a husband, and as just as a friend and someone who wanted to do good deeds, if you like. I was raised with, discipline and, sort of being respectful and having manners and things like that. So, those are all big things that I've taken into my life as an adult, I think, and hopefully sort of pass that on to our children. But family is number one. I say I've got two families. There's my football family, but there's my first and foremost, immediate family, which are the world to me. And it's, because of them and that foundation that I have, I've been married to Karen for 31 years now. We've got two children, a son and a daughter, Luke and Kenzie, and, a grandfather, as I mentioned at the beginning of this program. It's, that is my solid foundation, and everything that I've done and achieved is really, apart from maybe those early years when I was very focused as a young man growing up individually, just seems to have solidified and been made stronger with my family.
That's great to hear, and it's lovely to see. But that's something that obviously is so vitally important to you, and as is Southampton. And I know it runs through your veins. And this is probably a question you've been asked 1,000 times, but do you have a particular highlight when you look back on your career? I know the one goal, I think you said in the talk, but that aside, or that might be the highlight. I don't know. Tell me what when you look back, what was the highlight? What's the one thing you think? Yeah, that's what I'm most proud of.
Do you know, clearly, Tim, the one goal in the near 400 games is a memorable moment for sure. But genuinely, I could talk probably for an hour on the highlights and the memories that I have. that were just amazing. I guess ultimately, you know, to be paid to do something that I'd always loved doing and had a passion for was just the best thing ever. You know, I wouldn't have changed it for the world. And yeah, it's difficult to really pinpoint and say one particular thing, because there were just so many good things about earning a living doing something that you've got a love and a passion for.
Well, what about on the flip side? Is there anything that you look back on, a particular injury or a time where you were maybe out of the team that you struggled with, that was a challenge either physically or mentally? So is there a low point?
Again, you could maybe, similar to asking the question on, you know, the highlight, there are countless moments where you're tested, you're challenged, you're down about something. There's uncertainty. Being in professional sport and football like I was, you know, in my mind, and maybe I created this a little bit myself, I always felt I had to prove myself, you know, and that was almost like literally week to week and quite often day to day. You know, whenever I went into training, I felt I've got to be on it 100% to get into the manager's mind for picking the team on Saturday. And then when you're in the team, you know, I always felt I had to perform in the game itself. So, you know, if there's one thing I would change, I could look back and give myself some advice as a younger man, sat here now, it would be maybe not being so rough on myself and hard on myself, you know, because I'd be the first to be beating myself up after a game if I hadn't played well or hadn't done something right. And maybe that's the same to this day even. Maybe that's just part of my makeup a little bit. But I think I would probably tell myself to be a little bit kind to myself and not too hard on myself on occasions. But yeah, you know, uncertainty over contracts and maybe leaving the club and not being picked in the team, and injuries, as you say, they can be real down and low points through a sportsman or sports person's career. And I had many of those, and it's just trying to, like we all do, every challenge that any one of us really faces, whatever it may be, personally, professionally, it's somehow finding a way to navigate your way through that, whether that's by talking to somebody or sometimes just, you know, getting your own mind together and battling through it. And I guess my playing career and the challenges that I did in recent years can sort of go to show what is capable, when, you know, what all of us are capable of when you know, things aren't going well and aren't going as we like.
What are your sort of go-to coping mechanisms when things don't go right, either through your playing career or through the challenges when things aren't going your way? Where do you take yourself?
I've learned, I think at one point of my life, Tim, it was work harder. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like quite often, you know, there'd be players signed to replace me in the squad and in the team at Southampton. And my default would have been, right, okay, I'm not going to, you know, mope around or go and kick up a fuss. I'll just work harder. I'll show my worth to the manager and the coaching team. And I think that worked in that environment and that profession largely, just looking back and seeing how things worked out. But I think now, sat here as maybe sort of an older and wiser person in some ways, I think clearly that's not always the best method. Clearly, we're living in an age now where we realise, especially men, you know, are not great at, you know, opening up even to their nearest and dearest, or colleagues or friends or workmates. It's you know, talking about things is a big thing now, and I think sharing a problem can be a huge thing, and or seeking professional advice, even, you know, taking it that bit further. But yeah, certainly not bottling it up. And I've certainly done that in the past myself. And I've found ways of coping with that, you know, just like battling on and getting through things, when maybe in the past it would have been better to have sought a little bit of advice and help and shared the problem. You know, I don't have an ego or a problem, you know, sort of opening up to say now that if there was a problem, I think I would share that to a degree. But I think there's still that old, you know, that keep fighting, keep working, keep pushing through it, Franny part of me, yeah, which will always be there, I think. And I think at times maybe my mind and body certainly sort of wrestle with the two at times.
Yeah. Do you find that today when things aren't going your way or things aren't going the way you anticipated or the way you planned, that do you still find it a challenge to talk about those things if they're not going to plan, or do you find actually the talking helps?
Yeah, good question, Tim. I still find it a bit of a struggle. I think I'm better, I would say, and I guess it's having the people around you. In my mind, I think, well, I'd rather burden the problem personally rather than offload it and give somebody else something to worry about, maybe. But if there's something again that I've learned, maybe because I've quite often maybe. Probably like all of us, we all have our own ways of dealing with things and how we think about things. But for example, there was a problem, with me in my playing days. I know I would always think, well, okay, I'm going to get on and deal with this. And often when I look back, whatever that worry might have been at the time, once you're sort of like a little bit further down the line, the next day, the next hour, the next week, next month, next year, whatever, you look back on it and you think, what was I worrying about? It wasn't quite a big deal anyway, whatever the issue or the problem was at the time. And it could have seemed really, really bad. I think I take comfort from that now. And I did it with my challenges. I guess that say to myself is, okay, even if I'm struggling one way or another at this moment, and I've had some problems sort of with a back injury in recent years, which, has affected what I could do physically. And I've realized how much, being active and physical is a big part of how I can sort of be happy from day to day. Well, I'm just trying to think where I was leading with that, but how sort of really sort of not getting too wrapped up in that low moment or that moment of, I'm struggling at this point, because you will get through it somehow, even if you share the problem or not. But we're tougher than we realize, I think, quite often, and we're capable of coming through difficult times, and there will be better times and better days ahead for sure.
I wanted to talk to you about some of the challenges. That's certainly probably a case in point, I think, when you talk about some of the challenges that you've taken on. But just want to go back to sort of the tail end of your career, the twilight of your career. How old were you when you retired?
I was 34. When I retired from playing, yeah.
Okay. How for those of us who aren't professional footballers, and that's probably 99.9% of the people listening to this, what's it like coming towards the end of your career as a professional footballer, knowing that your playing days and the thing that you've worked so hard towards is coming to an end? That there are fitter, younger players coming through the ranks that are vying for your place in the team. That your time is limited, but you've got the rest of your life ahead of you. What does that look? How is that? I can't imagine what that's like, because for most of us at 34, we're only halfway through a third of the way through our career. We've still got 30 years of work ahead of us. What's that like? Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's well, you certainly realise that you're a long time retired from actually playing the sport that it is you do. And I think as a player, you're always, I was fortunate, certainly, Tim, that I was able to play for that long. Lots of players that I played with either had injury ending careers and, that ended their career and, weren't that fortunate to play into their 30s. So, I count myself very fortunate I was able to even go to that. I probably realistically could have played for longer, fitness wise, if I'd maybe dropped down a level and moved to another club, for example. That was a decision at the time. I retired, but decided not to do that, to either uproot my family, as I mentioned earlier, or, commute myself personally for a period of time. Made the decision to take a coaching role at Southampton Football Club that they'd offered. But yeah, it was a little bit of a novelty at the time that, I didn't then have to, go into, join up with the team and train on a Christmas day and go into a hotel on Christmas night or New Year's Eve to be ready for the game on a Boxing Day or New Year's Day. Those are the little downsides when families are involved as well around those sort of celebration periods. But that novelty sort of quickly wore off, and you realise that, wow, what do I do next? It's that huge dilemma for anyone that's in that kind of position. Mm-hmm. What are my skill sets, and what can I do moving forward to ultimately, still earn a living and provide for my family.
So for you, what did come next? How did you replace the buzz of football in your life? What took its place?
I don't think you actually can, Tim, to be honest. It's very difficult. And I think, the fitness and playing side of it, playing in front of, crowds and competing at that level, and the camaraderie of a dressing room and sort of training with your colleagues is what so many players miss, I think. And that is difficult to replace. I was fortunate again that, my father-in-law had a construction business, and I sort of joined forces with him for a period of time, and unfortunately sort of like we hit some difficult times, and that was a hard time again, from a personal perspective, to try and come through, and and how it affects people as well, so especially when it's family. So that was a difficult time, but it was, I think, at the age I am now, or in more recent years, I think I've found my calling, if you like. I work as a speaker, as you know. I also work as a football pundit. So I've still got a connection and work within the sport that I've always loved, albeit very different to playing. But between those two things, I absolutely love having that connection with the sport still, and speaking to various audiences to share my story, and hopefully relate to them and give, sort of takeaways that they can, put into their own lives to help them as well. So that's a big driving factor for me now, trying to.
And I think you're forgetting the small factor that you raised over £1 million for charity. That's just a small aside.
Well, I mean, that was a big reason for wanting to do the challenges as well. Not the one sole reason, but a huge factor of, if we're going to do these challenges, let's do it for a great cause, and let's hopefully make it a significant sum of money that will make a difference. And that was always the goal.
Let's talk about those challenges, because they are incredible. Talk us, for those who might not be aware of what you've done in on that side of things. How did you get into them, and why?
I guess linking what we've just been talking about, Tim. In 2006, I ran the London Marathon, and that's the first kind of event of that distance, really, and that size of event that I'd really signed up to and took part in. And I ran that for a local cancer charity that I was a patron of, and got a real buzz. Like the London Marathon is just incredible, isn't it? It's a wonderful.
I did it in 2019. I totally get it. Yeah, it is.
It gives you a real buzz, doesn't it? And I think that planted a little seed, because it gave me something to work towards, and I'd be very sort of like focus driven on my playing days. It was like, okay, gearing up for the next match, next weekend, whenever it's going to be. So having a training program to work towards the London Marathon back then was brilliant, and it gave me that focus a little bit more. So in later years, I started to become intrigued a little bit by, ultra endurance events that people were taking on, and wanted to test myself in something completely different to what I'd ever experienced in football, and both physically and mentally. And the challenges that I took on, which were three ultimately over a period of years, to raise what was a £1 million target. I didn't realise it would be quite so difficult to get to that sum of money. I was hoping it was going to be done after one challenge, but had to do another two to get there. And very, very proud and pleased to say that we're standing at around about £1.4 million that we've managed to raise as a family and as a team for Cancer Research UK. So
take us to the first challenge then. What was it, and how did you come up with it, and how did it go?
Yeah, well, it was sort of almost years in the making, thinking, well, what can I do? What am I going to do? When am I going to do it? And there's a big part of that, maybe, just committing to it. But when I did, we came up with the concept, and it was having that link and connection with my playing career in football. I decided to run to every Premier League football stadium without knowing how far it would be or what the exact mileage would be, and how exactly we were going to do it at the time. But that was the rawest concept, just run to every stadium. And we started at Newcastle, which was the most northerly stadium the particular year we started, and finished back in Southampton on a match day, where the plan was to do a lap of the pitch at half time with all the crowd in the stadium. So to make it a challenge for me, I was running anything between 40 and 50 miles a day every single day for 21 days.
I mean, that's incredible. I mean, I can't imagine what that's like and what that does to your body. But I mean, mentally, how do you get to that point? It's a bit like, you know, you hear these people's mountaineers saying they climb Everest because it's there and they got to do it, and they put their body through whatever it needs to do to get there. But how do you approach that challenge physically and mentally to sort of prepare yourself and to keep going when you're running that distance every day consecutively?
It's clearly very difficult, Tim.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, like anything, you know, it's almost just scaling up in a way. In a marathon, for example, you know, and this is not in a boastful or bragging sense or whatever, but when my mindset shifted, that was one part of it. It was the mindset. And then the next is the physical side of it. So, you know, my mind had to get around the fact that I was going to be running that kind of distance every single day in, day out for 3 weeks. So that's one side of it. I had to sort of comprehend that in my own mind and work towards it and believe that I was going to do that. Then it was training the body up to get it used to that kind of workload. And I'll be honest, you know, it's hard to prepare for that kind of strain and pressure, because you just don't know, even with the best training program, how you're going to react when you're doing that kind of distance day in, day out. And clearly, you know, there were some big challenges with injuries, with the best way to describe it, mental trauma and physical trauma throughout the 3 weeks that I had to overcome, but managed to do that, you know, whether it's personally on myself or with the help of my family and the support team that I had with me.
Was it a case of the crowd pulling you along as well? Did you get good support along the way? People joining you? Did people come with you on parts of the run?
Yeah, you know, sort of former teammates, just people from the charity, complete strangers that I'd never met before, well-wishers, people from the charity. It was brilliant. You know, we had a huge amount of support, people coming along. But then, having said that, you know, if you as a runner, Tim, I don't know, you know, what you prefer. There were times when I really welcomed, you know, some company and someone to chat to. And there were other times where, you know, I didn't want to appear rude, and hopefully it wasn't with someone I hadn't met before. But there were times I just wanted to be in silence and with my own thoughts, and just try and tick through the miles and clock through the hours to get to the end of a day. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that I found ways of trying to cope with, you know, being immersed in a challenge like that at the time.
Yeah, fantastic. I've always found that running is an incredible, you know, mentally, you know, really does different things to you. And I was diagnosed with cancer a few years back, and I ran throughout that time and during my recovery afterwards, and it gave me that kind of headspace that nothing else could do. And so I always found it that kind of escape for me. And I totally get what you're saying in terms of sometimes you just want to be completely by yourself and just run in with your own thoughts going through your head. And something that running does that just sort of is the best medicine in a way that you could get in that kind of situation.
Yeah, no, for sure. And as you say, you know, it's one of those things that I think is great in the sense that, other than a kit and a pair of trainers, you know, it's not something that you necessarily need equipment for. You know, you don't even need one of these smart devices that we all wear now, and certainly not music at times. I know a lot of people like running with music. I'm not that bothered, to be honest. There's occasions when I do run with a bit of music, but predominantly I don't. And that was part of the training for me as well. You know, just sort of touching on the music side of things, Tim, was, you know, I didn't want to have to rely on sticking some earplugs in and listening to music to get me through the miles and get through the day. You know, I ran without music largely because I saw that as a training my mind and my resilience to build up for what was to come in the challenge. So you know, I almost wanted to experience that pain and suffering, knowing that it was definitely going to come at some point when we were doing the challenge itself.
Once that was done and you tick that off, and I don't know how much you'd raised at that point, but at what point did you then think, that's not enough for me, I want to do something else? And when did you start thinking about the next one?
The very first morning after the challenge finished. I knew straight away. Yeah, we'd raised at that point about £265,000, and it's a huge sum of money, and we were so grateful for all the donations we'd had to that point. But it wasn't the £1 million, and as much as I was relieved on that morning not to get up and have to run that day because we'd completed the challenge, I knew I was going to take another challenge on in the hope of getting to that £1 million mark. And that sort of took effectively 2 years, or 2 or 3 years to come to fruition, to give myself, my body time to heal and recover and, come up with another challenge, because we'd set the bar pretty high. That was a dilemma for me and my family and team to come up with something that would capture people's imagination again, in the hope that they would continue to donate and support, what we were doing. And that sort of took a bit of time. So with the training and planning again for the next challenge, it was a few years before we got to that point.
And the next one was every Premier League club and every Championship club. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So we added the Championship clubs to the Premier League clubs like we've done before. Mm-hmm. And we added a second discipline as well, Tim. So, the challenge this time was 44 clubs, but in a shorter space of time. So it was over 2 weeks. And I ran a marathon every single morning. And then when I'd finished the marathon, I'd get changed into a cycling kit and get on my bike and cycle for a minimum of 75 miles every single day as well. So I was covering at least 100 miles a day, running and cycling 14 days on that challenge.
Wow. And how did it go?
It roughed me up good and bad, like everyone did, to be honest. But yeah, it was great. I mean, there were, like every challenge that I guess any of us take on, regardless of what it is. There's moments where the going gets really, really tough, and there's moments where you're in a nice rhythm and a nice flow, and you're feeling confident and strong and positive. But that can change in a second, can't it? With an injury or something. So yeah, and one thing I think I've learned as well is that I never took the good moments for granted. And I was like that a little playing career. I always knew I was fortunate doing what I was doing. I was very grateful as well. And on the challenges, when I felt good and felt strong, I tried to embrace that and enjoy it, because I knew there were going to be those moments where I don't feel this good. And that clearly was the case.
But every uphill there's a downhill, isn't there? I suppose that's always the way. Where every downhill there's an
exactly.
Whatever. So what came next after that? Talk us through sort of the how that one went, and then how that sort of segued into your next challenge.
Yeah, again, we managed to complete that again, and it was very much similar finish to the last one on a match day at St Mary's. Again, the football club were brilliant in allowing me to finish on a match day, and I think I'd heard after that, I didn't realise that the club had lost out at thousands of pounds of revenue, because most of the supporters stayed in their seat to see the lap and finishing, interviewing things, and they weren't going down to spend the money in the concourse in the
a lot of unsold pies down there at half time.
But again, after that, very much like the first one, we still hadn't reached that £1 million target that I'd promised from day one. So, I was really thinking, I can't believe, I'm going to have to do a third one to get there, hopefully. And again, that took a period of time to come round. And by this stage, there were members of the team, the support team, that weren't too keen answering my phone calls and messages at this point, because I think they knew what was coming. We built a bit of a dream team, and of course I was going back to the same people again. And you feel a little bit bad, don't you, sometimes, Tim, when you're raising money for charity at times. It's a great cause, and it's something that's going to be done, but you feel a little bit guilty going back to the same people quite often. And but the support was incredible. It just went from strength to strength. More people came on board for the last challenge, and there was always, up to that point still, as much as I'd been broken and challenged on those two challenges, there was still a part of me. It was like, what is that breaking point for me? It's I still want to push myself, and I guess everything came to a head on that last challenge.
Yeah, now I know, because I was at that talk, obviously, that did come to a head in that last challenge. Tell us a little bit about it. It was seven Ironmans in 7 days, but there came to a point, didn't there, along that journey where things didn't quite go to plan?
No, that's right. Yeah, and there was a bit of a flow, and I thought this worked nicely. I came up with the idea. We'd done a running only challenge over 3 weeks, a running and cycling challenge over 2 weeks. So the last concept we came up with, my wife was always saying, like, these 3 week and 2 week challenges are too long on everyone. it's tough on you. It's hard on the family and the support team. There's people giving up annual holiday to come and support the challenges. It's not fair being so long. She said, try and do something shorter. So I thought, well, we've done 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 challenge, 2 challenge. Let's do a 3 challenge discipline over 1 week, and came up with the Ironman distance triathlon every day for a week. And yeah, started that, had to get months and months of preparation in. Swimming was not my activity or sport. And yeah, I was really struggling for a long time, but this was the challenge, as you touched on, Tim, that was not my decision, and it was the lady who was looking after me, my physio, who, along with my family, made the decision to withdraw me on medical reasons to go to hospital and get checked out by the doctors on the morning of day 5 after I'd done four of the Ironmans. But I was in a pretty bad way at that point, so they wanted to withdraw me and get me checked out. And I was devastated at the time. I was broken. I thought the challenge is over. Money's not going to come in now. And, I haven't completed the challenge personally that I've set out to achieve. But this is the magical part about it, Tim. What happened at that point was my family and the support team picked up the baton, and they continued to swim, bike and run every single mile of that Ironman distance triathlon for the next 2 days, so that I could get rest, get checked out at the doctors, and it enabled me to come back and finish day 7. So individually, I completed 5 in 7, but as a team, we completed the 7 in 7 and broke through that £1 million target. So it was really rewarding, and I'd found my boundaries at this point. I've found those limits. So I know what I'm capable of now, but
what's that like?
No.
Tell me what that's like then, because for someone who obviously is as focused as you are, as you have that winning mentality drilled into you, and obviously that ran throughout your playing career, throughout the previous challenges as well. What was it like to actually get to that point where I'm broken, I'm done now. This is it. I know how far I can go. This is it. What's that like at that point, or how do you cope with that?
Well, I was devastated, as I say. There's a bit of footage that I've got that my wife Karen is recording, and it was about 5 o'clock in the morning when my wife, or just before 5, I think it was 4:30, that Karen called Kelly, the lady I was saying, my medic, if you like, and physio, to come into our room to discuss the problems that I'd shared with Karen. Like I had a racing heartbeat, and the night before my vision was going blurred and things like that. And there were things happening to my body that I thought, this clearly isn't right and normal. And I wasn't eating as well. That was a big thing for me through all the challenges. I struggled to put the calories in to fuel my body. So, there were some concerns sort of day 3, day 4 that I'd had personally, but didn't really share them. And then when I eventually shared it with Karen, she brought Kelly into the conversation, and she gave me about a 5 or 10 minute chat about why she was going to make the decision to get me checked out at hospital along with my family. And straight after she said, this emotional speech about why she's withdrawing me, I turned around and said, so shall I get in the pool then? And I just was not thinking straight. I wasn't looking through it with a clear set of eyes or my mind. And I guess,
so if they hadn't done that, if they hadn't made that decision, do you think you would have got up and tried to have done?
I think I certainly would have tried. Yeah, even if I wasn't able to complete it, I would have. Yeah, that I was programmed, I think, Tim, to just keep going. And then I remember my son Luke coming in, and when this decision was made, and I was feeling just crushed by it, because I thought that it's over and I haven't completed it. Luke said, only you'll know, Dad. He said, if this is the right decision and if it's comfortable for you. And when he said that, it just shifted my thinking a little bit, because I almost looked deep down inside myself at that point, and I thought, I haven't got anything else to give. And I know it's the right decision. And because of that, it's always sat comfortably with me. I've got no regrets about that. Sure, I would have liked to have done all 7, but I know that I was getting dangerously at the point where I could have done some long-lasting damage, and the decision with me was right.
Sure. It must be hard though, because that's the logical side of your brain taking control over the emotional side of your brain, isn't it? The emotional side of your brain saying, keep going, keep going, keep going. But buried deep down is that logical side saying, this isn't good, this isn't right.
No.
So that must have been, it must have been hard.
Yeah, it was a torment, at the time. But in as much as it was a torment for a short period of time, as I say, that part of my brain thought, and even that feeling I had as well was, this is the right call. I've got nothing else. But resting for a couple of days and getting checked over to make sure there was nothing long lasting that was going to happen by continuing, it enabled me to come back and finish day 7, which was brilliant.
And I imagine great pride in those people who ran in your place and swam and biked in your place as well.
Oh, do you know what, Tim? I think, whenever any of us go through, whether it's with our family, friends, work colleagues, a team of whatever that a team might look like. And I often refer to a team, the football team I've played in over the years, Team Benali, we call it, the family, my support team. I know for a fact I could not have done any of these challenges without them, 100%. So they are a massive part of it. And, the experiences we've been through, I think, unless, and when I say this, I mean like the on-road team especially, the ones that are getting less sleep. I was getting 4 to 5 hours sleep a night on these challenges. They were often getting less than that because they were doing other jobs. I was the priority to get treated, get fed, get into bed. That was it, and start the recovery process for the next day. They were doing all the other jobs all around that. So they were working harder in some ways than I was on sleep deprivation and things. So, the bond that we've built, not just with my family, but the individuals and the companies that come on board, there's a real experience we've shared, and the pleasure in knowing that we've managed to raise a huge sum of money as well, which is very pleasing. So it's a real unique bond. And although I haven't said that, people often ask what's next. And at the moment, given that I touched on a little bit earlier, some personal injuries that I've had in recent years is really frustrating because it's set me back, from where I would like to be doing, more active things at this moment in time.
Yeah. I'd say getting some practice in on changing nappies again. That's going to be the next challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, that can be a real challenge, can it? Yeah. But I'm looking forward to that one.
So just tell me, I mean, obviously that was a big knock for you in terms of that challenge. What advice would you give to people? We all face knocks in life. We all get, maybe not in such extreme circumstances in terms of realizing where our breaking points are, but what would your advice be to anybody in terms of how do you pick yourself up again once you get knocked down?
So I think there's a number of ways, Tim, and I guess ultimately it's a case of each one of us finding the right way that works and how that can help us. There's one thing I've definitely learned from doing these ultra endurance challenges in recent years and my playing career is that when we think we can't go any further or we've given everything that we've got, there's something inside of us that can keep us going. We've always got that our boundaries are further than what we really understand. And, I've pushed those and I've sort of like stretched them beyond anything I'd ever thought was possible personally. So I truly believe that every single one of us are capable of doing that. Like I said, it doesn't have to be extreme endurance challenges as I've taken on. It could be anything in any of our lives that could be an issue or a problem or something that's a challenge for us. But we can get through it. And quite often, as I've just touched on, it's not just, on your own. It's with a network of people around you, a team of people or one person even. And it's taking help when you need it. And from the challenge perspective, it was bringing people in with skill sets, not just the skills, but more importantly, what was crucial for me, and this is key in anything I would do going forward, it's the personality and character of the person that was more important than anything else. Because when those tough times do come along, we're stripped back and we've got to react in a certain way under those kind of pressures. But I think any one of us is capable of doing incredible things. Clearly, we find those challenges and difficulties through our lives at some stage or another, whether it's big or small. But there's always better days ahead, and things that we can overcome. And you don't have to be brilliantly fit or clever or the strongest, whether it's mentally or physically. But we've still got ways of overcoming adversity in our lives, and I think that's what's brilliant about the human makeup and the spirit and the power of the mind. I think that's the other thing is, I've been physically broken on many occasions on these challenges, but there's something in your mind that I had a purpose and a reason of doing what I was doing, and that drove me on massively, and carried me way beyond the point of when I would have probably stopped and given up without that purpose. So I think having a purpose and a reason for what we're doing, or why we want to do something or get over something, is a big thing as well.
One thing stuck in my memory from your talk at the school, you said, I quote, "Life begins at the end of your comfort zone." I thought that was a great little nugget to leave the kids with. Is that something that you live your life by?
I think, having done these experiences in recent years, Tim, there was that intrigue about, where are those, what is that comfort zone and how far can I push it? I've stepped into some realms that are, quite out there in many aspects. And I know for a fact I've grown physically and mentally because of it. But yeah, it's something that I would sort of certainly encourage people to do things that challenge you, that scare us, that frighten us, that we don't think we're capable of doing, but just break it down as well. I touched on sort of being hard on myself as a player back in my playing days. Don't beat yourself up about things, whether it's could be, I don't know, getting fit or losing weight or anything. Trying to progress your career, improve a relationship with someone. It could take many aspects, but just take it one little step at a time. That's how mentally I broke down some of those challenges. If I looked at it as the big picture, it was overwhelming at times. And it was a piece of advice my wife gave me after the first day on the first challenge. I couldn't sleep. I was physically sick. And in my mind, I couldn't fall asleep because I was tossing and turning. The enormity of getting up again in a few hours, running another 40 plus miles for another 20 days was too much in my mind. And she said something to me then that I'd take moving forward ever since that point. She said, you can do it one day. You've just done it today. So don't look at it any more than a one-day challenge. And that was how I dealt with it. That was the furthest I looked ahead at that point. And I broke that down into smaller bite-sized chunks to get me through it. So it might have been get through the next hour or get through the next 5-10 miles. And depending on how I was feeling, it was literally at times just put one foot in front of the other. And I guess that's all any of us could do at times. It's just put that next step forward. Don't look at the big picture. It's not as overwhelming as it can seem looking at the big picture, but just take one step and one little bit at a time and you can get to the end point.
I think that's a great way to live. One day, one step at a time. I couldn't agree more. Franny, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. I've got one final question I have to ask you. What are your hopes for Southampton this year? Are they going to bounce straight back up again?
Well, I'm optimistic, Tim. I certainly hope so. I'm going to probably be working on a few games this season. So I want to see it. Started the season well. I was working on Friday night with Sky at Sheffield Wednesday, and we got a good start there. But the cup defeat the other day wasn't so good. So I'm hoping we can have a positive campaign, bounce straight back. But we've got this moment we're doing the recording. It's there's a few speculations about transfers, players leaving, isn't there? So
always is this time of year, isn't it? This is always a good time of year on that front.
I'm waiting for that transfer window to slam shut, and then we'll know what's going on. But I'm optimistic. I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Excellent. Well, listen, thank you very much. Wish you the best of luck. Wish them the best of luck, and let's see how it goes. But thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, Franny, and all the best. Take care.
You too. Cheers, Tim.
That's it for this episode. A huge thank you to Franny Benali for giving us an insight into the incredible mental resilience needed to achieve your dreams and to take on the seemingly impossible. Don't forget, you can keep the conversation going by answering our episode question, which this time around is simply, what's the biggest challenge you've ever had to overcome? You can post your answer using your mobile device on the Spotify episode page, the link to which can be found in the episode notes or via the Linktree site in the Brave Front show profile. You can also leave us a voice message, again through the Linktree or the link in the episode notes. So why not let us know what you thought of our interview with Franny? And if you've enjoyed the show, leave us a review, share it with a friend, and please subscribe wherever you usually get your podcasts. In the meantime though, take care, and I'll see you soon.